I've been in the financing or the lending business for a long time alongside my rental business
Interesting.
because lending makes good cash flow. Like if you can make 8%, 10%, 12% interest loaning to other investors or creating notes, like selling some of your properties with financing, those were always a really good balance for me of having rental properties for growth and steady cash flow and having notes, essentially mortgages to other investors and also to tenants who I finance properties to.
Over the last several years, if you happen to own rental properties or frankly, even owner occupied home, you have seen a lot of equity growth. Unfortunately, given rising insurance, rising taxes, rising expenses, perhaps your cash flow has not kept up. What should you do today if you have a lot of equity? Let's just pick a number, 200 grand, but your cash flow is not where you want it to be. We're going to have this conversation with Coach Carson, small and mighty investor, to talk about, hey, how should I leverage equity to get more cash flow? Coach, how you doing?
What's going on, Michael? It's a good conversation. I've had several of these conversations lately, and this is actually part of my journey too. That it just happens that if you have leveraged real estate, then your equity gets magnified. It grows at a larger pace often than the cash flow grows. So even if you've done well, the cash flow often takes time to catch up. So I've had these conversations many times with more advanced investors, like intermediate advanced. They're like even more than 200. They have 200,000, or maybe they have $1 million, $1.5 million. They're like, I have $1 million. On paper, I'm a millionaire, but like I'm not able to support myself with my rental properties. Like, what's up with that? And so I think it's an interesting situation, and it's also something that you don't hear talked about on YouTube or other channels that much because it's a little bit more advanced. And so I thought it'd be cool for you and I to rip on it a little bit because I call it harvesting your equity. Like it's actually like a farmer. You have this equity on the table, but until you do something to it, until you actually go out and till the soil, until you move some things around, prune some properties, you don't actually turn that equity into something that you could use to live off of. If that's what you want to do, that's not what everybody wants to do. But if you actually want to like use your cash flow to pay the bills, like you got to make some moves. So I don't know. Do you want to go into talk about some of those potential moves that
Well,
you can do?
yeah, absolutely. I think, we may even disagree on some of these. I think, but the point starting this out is if you get into the real estate game and you're in it for any length of time, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, you will get to a point where you have a lot of equity and maybe the cash flow hasn't kept up as a percentage. This will happen. So this is something that you are going to think about eventually. So I wrote about kind of two strategies in my book that I used and have used others since then. But the first one I did was on Norris Drive. And frankly, I did it wrong. Norris Drive, I buy for 107. At some point, it goes to 200. And I go back to the bank and I do what's called just a straight up cash out refi. I take the current debt, I add on more debt, and I get a check at closing for say 40 grand. Unfortunately, I took my cash flow, which was say 250 bucks, and made it negative. So that's where the term alligator came from in my world. So I now believe that was a mistake. I took out too much cash. I should have done better. But what did I do with that 40 grand? I did use that 40 grand to buy 2 more properties that each cash flowed. It each allowed me to have a larger asset base because real estate would rip in my market for the next couple of years. So in hindsight, many people would say that was okay, but I really don't think that's okay. I don't think turning a positive cash flow property into a negative one to go buy more assets is a great idea, even though I did it one time.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to think if you borrow money, it should either improve your cash flow situation or be break even. And so, for example, if I like a lot of people take out a HELOC on their house, they have a ton of equity on your home. This is one situation, and you have 100,000 or 200,000 equity in your home. Like, I don't think you should go and like take $200,000 out and put it as like 5 down payments on rental properties because leveraged real estate often has like some really big ups and downs, especially the first 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
What I do think you could do though is go pay cash for a property with that $200,000 or make a significant down payment and then use it to do like a refinance. You can then refinance it later, do like a BRRRR strategy or just something where you can take advantage of the fact that you can write a check out of your HELOC. And then,
Mm-hmm.
my strategy with the HELOC is never to leave it on a property. Like you don't want to like,
Yes.
it's a short-term money. It's a short-term tool. And so you don't want it to be out there 12 months, 15 months, 2 years. You want to just be out there 3 months, 6 months. And it's
Yep.
just it's a tool to get in and out, in and out. And but that's a great use of your equity, like in terms of home equity. Like that's an outstanding way, because then that new property, after it's financed and stabilized, could have cash flow, or if you're in the growth mode, it could have a lot of equity that you could then continue kind of compounding.
Oh, I love that. And Olivia and I were very clear. We did that 3, 4, 5 different times. We did have a home equity line on our primary home. We used it 3 or 4 times to buy cash, move, strike fast. But here, like you said, our agreement, mine to hers, because I was finding deals, she was running the business, was if I did that, I could not buy anything else until the HELOC was paid off.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So something else that I did, which really turbocharged my business was, and again, some of this is just fortuitous timing. I realized that I thought single family homes were overpriced in 2006. So, yeah, and just put some numbers on this. Norris Drive went from 107 to 300 in like 5 years. That's crazy growth. So instead of selling and paying the tax man, what we did is we did a 1031 exchange. So we moved our equity into bigger things. Now, this is something that the big boys do all the time, right? Some people get on this 1031 racket and they're always trading up to bigger and bigger assets. So something you can do if you think your asset has had a good run and you can identify an underappreciated or undervalued asset, you could execute a 1031 and go bigger. What do I mean by that? We went from 8 doors to 80 doors in about 12 to 15 months. No new money. It's just all equity we moved. And cash flow exploded. It went from, I don't know, call it $2,000 to $10,000.
Do you remember what the down payments were? So like you had equity from the
Mm-hmm.
appreciation of Norris and other properties. So you had a
Yeah.
certain amount of equity. Like how much of a
LT
down payment was that on the new stuff?
LTVs were right around 55%. We were
There you
moving
go.
that much equity. And the asset we were buying, multifamily, believe it or not, was underpriced because they were all vacant, because
Yeah.
everybody was buying a home.
Yeah.
So we moved equity into assets that were underpriced. LTVs were 55%. And to your point, after we seasoned those properties, which took about 6 to 9 months, we went back and did a cash out refi on 2 or 3 of them. So we had all of our money out. Think about that. We took all of our down payment money from our houses out of the apartments. We have no money. This is hard for people to believe. We have zero money, zero original money in our entire portfolio because of that.
You pulled out all the cash that you had invested all those years, and then some,
And then some.
and then you did some more deals with it, right? Took it,
Yep.
bought some more.
Exactly.
Well, I want to go back to that particular deal, because this is like, if we were looking at this as like different tools you could use to access your equity and turn it into cash flow. We talked about the HELOC rule, which is like, just a lot of people are going to have equity in their home. They can do that to buy more properties. The other that you did, though, I think, is let's start talking about selling existing rental properties and deciding that, like, for whatever reason, whether you think, all right, this market's appreciated, or I think what I saw you do is that you're kind of playing chess. Like, you're using your pawn, your single family houses, which have advantages too. I like single family, but then you are transferring your equity in that property to a different type of asset, a multifamily property. But the thing I think you did that a lot of people might not need to remember is you got into it with a low loan to value, 55%, which is going to have a huge effect on the cash flow, because the equity that you put into a multifamily property, just the return on your equity is going to be much better than the single family cash on cash return, just by the nature of, so your cap rate on a multifamily property might be, I don't know, 7, 8, 9%, whereas single family is going to be 3, 4, 5%, when you sell it. So you've like doubled your cap rate on a property. So even if you're in the same, like you got a good deal where you bought it below value, but even if you're in the same place, you just traded retail for retail, you would still be in better shape on the multifamily from a cash flow standpoint. So you're choosing to go from a growth property, essentially like a blue chip growth stock, to a kind of dividend paying property that produces cash flow. So that's a smart move. Like you actually had a fuel to the fire by also buying it at a discount. You could pull your money back out. But I think that's just important to point that out, is basically, if you have a bunch of equity. I had a student who had this situation too. She had 2 single family houses in Austin, Texas, and the rents had not kept up at all. She's making a little bit of cash flow, but she had like $1 million in equity in 2 properties. And so by selling those and 1031ing and buying multiple properties that were more cash flow centric, that one move like took equity and activated it and produced cash flow. So I think it's a smart move.
I love that. I mean, and a lot of us, you know, I'll just call it luck, right? We're in a market like Austin or, you know, Fresno that went up, you know, 150% in 3 years. When you're in those markets and you get that rapid appreciation, and in Texas, right, if it's a rental, taxes get reassessed. So you could, your equity could go up and your cash flow could go down, right? If it works that way. Sometimes you have to realize the equity is not being treated well, right? The return on equity in an Austin home when you have $1 million and $200 in cash flows, terrible. So it's your job, especially if you're in growth mode. If you're in growth mode, you got to use that equity better. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's, you know, okay, let me ring the register and move it somewhere else.
Yep. I agree. So I want to talk about another tool. This is one we might have a little bit of, back and forth on, is like, I think what you talked about, going and doing a 1031, moving your equity to a higher cash flow property, that makes a ton of sense, both for growth people and even maybe people farther along in like the harvesting phase. But if you're kind of small and mighty and you're like, all right, I don't really want to go bigger. I don't want to go from 8 properties to 80. I don't want to take on that bigger debt. I think it's also reasonable, and you can make the case that you make a move that's financially maybe not quite as growth. It's not going to be as good for your growth, but where you sell a property, or you sell, let's say you had 15 properties, you sell 5 of them, and you choose 5 that have a lot of equity, but aren't your best rental properties. They're not going to be your good long-term properties from a maintenance standpoint. And you basically just harvest those. You prune those properties, you sell them, you pay taxes, and then you either do 2 things. And here's the classic one that I talk about: is you go ahead and pay off debt on some of your existing portfolio. So now instead of 15 properties, you have 10, and you have a much smaller portfolio with less debt, with more cash flow. That works. Like, you could do that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've done as well is you sell those properties, you pay tax, and then use some of that money to get into the lending business. And this is something I haven't talked about a lot, but I've been in the financing or the lending business for a long time alongside my rental business, because lending makes good cash flow. Like, if you can make 8%, 10%, 12% interest loaning to other investors, or creating notes, like selling some of your properties with financing, those were always a really good balance for me, of having rental properties for growth and steady cash flow, and having notes, essentially mortgages, to other investors and also to tenants who I finance properties to. Those cash flow from the notes kind of offset some of the rentals, so that I could afford to hold the growth rentals and still have cash flow today. So that's another idea to throw out there.
I love both of those. And again, I think to me, it really comes down, are you in growth mode, or are you in kind of management mode? During my growth mode, we only sold 1 property. It was a property that we had just purchased, and then the government came out with some $8,000 tax incentive, and the value went up like $100,000. It was total an accident of timing. So we rung the register on that. It's the only one we ever, quote unquote, flipped. It was a complete accident. But once we retired, one of the things we did on purpose, and we still have done it, is we've gone in our portfolio and looked at the worst performers. Last year, and I guess it's 2 years ago now, we sold a triplex because it was 80% of our headaches. Literally 80% of our headaches were this one property. And, return on time, or return on headaches, it wasn't great. So we took it, paid the taxes, rung the register. To your point, the other thing we did as we went to management mode is we paid off debt on purpose. I want to have a handful of assets free and clear. I went through the Great Recession. I know how crazy it could get. I know if the world came to an end, we could lose everything. But we have this set of properties, call it 10, 15, that we owe no debt on. So it's, we could limp along. I think that's great. And I do think there's a time that going smaller makes sense. Right. But when you do that, you got to realize, especially if you're in an appreciation market, in your example, from 15 to 10, you're cutting off 1/3 of the equity growth. Mm-hmm. But that might be okay. And then lastly, one of the most meaningful chapter in my second book, 15 Conversations with Real Estate Millionaires, was with an 80-year-old young lady, 80-year-old woman, whose story was how she's unwinding her portfolio that her and her husband built over 40 years. And a lot of that was seller financing. She hadn't actually done a purchase in like a decade, but to your point, She was a private money lender for a decade, and that's where she was comfortable. She didn't want to do the work, take the risk, all of that. So I think that little twist that you've just given us is an excellent tool to have: seller financing and creating a pile of money and then making that an 8, 10, 12% short-term money. I think it's great advice and something I've never talked about. It's a genius move.
I don't talk about it a lot either because it's typically, I don't think it's a beginner strategy. And I think if you want to be a lender, if you want to be a financing, and I love loaning money and being the lender, but you got to be always, always, always prepared to take that property back. And so
Yeah.
first you need to learn how to be a rental owner, and then you can become a lender. Because if you just get into the lending game and you don't want to take that property back because you just don't know what to do with it, or you don't know how to handle it, or you're scared, you're in trouble. Like
Yeah. Don't do that.
you're done, because the cardinal rule of loaning money or financing a property is that you always want to only loan enough, and you only want to loan on properties you're willing to take back at that price. It needs to be a good deal for you. That's
Yeah.
the
And when you say price, remember he's talking about the debt number, not the acquisition price, the
yeah,
debt number.
exactly. So whatever. So if you're loaning $200,000, this needs to be a $300,000 property, for example, so that
Exactly.
you'd be excited to take that property back and say, all right, all good, I'll take this property back and rent it out or flip it or whatever.
Now, are you also doing short term call a year or less?
A little bit, yeah. We went through a streak of loaning money to a local builder friend where he would build houses and we'd loan the money. We've got here, we don't promote it, we don't advertise it, we don't try to get it out
Yeah.
there, but yeah, we do a little bit of that. And then I'm more interested in doing long-term deals where I put my money
Oh,
into something and I don't have to keep going in and out, in and out. Like I'll do some
okay.
hard money loans, but it's just a kind of, for me, it's just a pain to have to
Yeah.
put the money in a new deal. So what I'd rather do is find like the deal I did in Montana, where we put $650,000 or 700,000 into a long-term partnership with somebody
Mm.
who I vetted. And so then we're going to own the upside, but we're also going to get some cash flow as a money partner. I would much rather do that than I would a lending deal, but I do the lending too. So it's both.
Very, very cool. Well, Coach Carson, you are amazing. Where can people find you?
You can find me at Coach Carson on YouTube, or you can go to my website, coachcarson.com, for my newsletter that comes out every week. And if you want to get the book, The Small Mighty Real Estate Investor, it's on Bigger Pockets. It's on Amazon, wherever you get your books, it's out there.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks.